What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are finally here. We are at the wild card round. We're going to be doing our predictions for the wild card round for the 2020 NFL season today. This is really exciting. You know, we're down to the final 14 teams here. It's kind of crazy. You know, this season really did fly by, but at the same time, feels like it's been a long journey to get to this point, and I'm really excited. So there are 3 games this Saturday, which is the day that this is going to be uploaded, and there's going to be 3 on Sunday as well. So we'll do those in order. So let's just get straight into it. Alright, so the first game is an AFC wildcard matchup between the Colts and the Bills. This one is really interesting. Obviously, it's the gameplay you're seeing here. But the main thing I'm interested to see about this one is I'm interested to see how Josh Allen and the Bills offense is going to handle the Colts defense, because they are still a really good team. And also how the Colts running game is going to look against the Bills defense. You know, their secondary is really good. I would argue probably the best secondary in the league, you know, if not, you know, towards the top. But, you know, their run defense, I believe it's pretty good at the moment, but it wasn't for a little bit of a patch in the middle of the season. However, Jonathan Taylor is just a different type of running back. You know, he's really good this year. A lot of people predicted that. I wasn't so sure, but, you know, he proved me wrong for sure. But Jonathan Taylor is going to be a huge impact on this Colts game because, you know, Philip Rivers has been playing. He's been playing pretty well, you know, this year. But he's had a couple games where he's had some turnover issues. We'll have to see if he'll hold up his streak of, you know, not having a problem with that through into the playoffs here. But, you know, I'm not so sure, especially since this Bills secondary is so good, you know. But I do think that the Bills are going to win, especially because they get the home field advantage, and I believe there's going to be fans there. It's going to be a big help for them. You know, the Bills Mafia is pretty crazy. And I think that they're going to be a big factor as to why the Bills are going to be pumped up and they're going to stay in it, you know, through and through. And I do think the Bills are going to win this. Although, you know, the big question mark, especially if the Colts lose, is will Philip Rivers retire? And I think he will, whether they go the distance or not. I think that he's probably, you know, I think the Colts was a really good place for him to play his last year of his career. You know, he got some protection. He didn't play terrible football at all. He played better than he had been the past couple seasons in LA. But, you know, he does have a little bit left in the tank, I think. I think this year kind of proved to us that if he wants to sign a one-year deal with the Colts again, you know, or if he wants to go to another team perhaps, you know, it would be pretty interesting to see him go to a third team, considering he played so many years for the Chargers. But, you know, I just think that the Colts do have a good shot of winning this game. But I just think that the Bills are going to win this. They're just a powerhouse, I think. Some people have said it best, you know, in the last stretch of the season, I think the Bills have been the best team in the NFL. It's going to be pretty crazy to see this game. I'm really, you know, all these matchups this week, with the exception of one of them, which we'll get into later, they're really good matchups, and I think that they have, you know, a chance to be really good games, like every single one of them, kind of like last year, where every wild card game was just a classic game, and, you know, some of them went to overtime, some of them had high drama, and they were just really close, competitive games, and both teams were doing really well, and any team last year had a chance to win their respective games, and I think it's going to be similar to that this year. These teams are really well matched. I'm a big fan of how the wild card, you know, the matchups turned out. They should be pretty good games, but for this one in particular, I do have the Bills winning. So this next matchup is an NFC wildcard matchup between the Rams and the Seahawks. This is obviously a division matchup, which is kind of interesting. You know, third time these teams will play each other this year. And, you know, the thing that I want to point out is that this is going to go up Saturday morning. There's plenty of time, you know, between the time of uploading and the game starting, as well as, you know, between Saturday and Sunday for news to change, you know, people to be ruled out or included in, you know, the active roster for the games. So if there's something that gets contradicted, I apologize. You know, I'll try to make a notation if I can in time. But if I can't, then I apologize for that. But for now, apparently in practice for the Rams this week, John Wolford has been getting the majority of the snaps. Jared Goff's been throwing okay, but Sean McVay hasn't, you know, hasn't fully ruled him, you know, in for the game. Something to keep an eye on for sure. Wolford played all right. You know, he was really good on the ground. He wasn't necessarily that great at passing against the Cardinals last week, but he did look pretty impressive in his pro debut. It's going to be pretty interesting to see if he does start, what he's going to be able to do in a playoff situation. It's kind of interesting considering he's only 1-0, you know, as a starter. However, the Seahawks are just, you know, they struggle occasionally in the regular season. You know, like their defense is kind of weighing them down this year. and Russell Wilson had a kind of rough second half of the season. They just, in the playoffs, Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson always put together magic, to go on a run. And I think they're going to do something similar here. I do think the Seahawks have a chance to win. The Rams' defense is going to be tough for Russell Wilson to overcome. But they did beat him this year. They did win a game against the Rams. I'm not so sure that the Rams, led by John Wolford, can beat the Seahawks. The Seahawks' defense did improve in the second half of the season. They were terrible. They were on record bad pace. I'm pretty sure they slowed down those bad numbers, but I just don't think that John Wolford is going to be able to lead this Rams team to a win over the Seahawks. And I basically, they didn't beat the Cardinals emphatically last week, and I just don't think they're going to be able to outscore the Seahawks offense at all. I don't know if Jalen Ramsey is going to be able to contain DK Metcalf, because we don't know what he's capable of in the playoffs. When he's motivated like that, who knows how DK Metcalf's going to play? I mean, who knows how Jalen Ramsey's going to play, because they only had the one playoff run in Jacksonville, I should say. We haven't seen him in the playoffs since, so it should be pretty interesting to see how Jalen Ramsey plays, especially in a matchup against a top receiver like DK Metcalf. So that's definitely something to watch. But in the end, I do think that the Seahawks are going to win this game. Should be a really close one, and I'm really excited to see this one. Division games of football are always fun to watch, especially when they're in the playoffs. Alright, so the primetime matchup for Saturday is arguably the most interesting playoff game. For me, other than the Steelers game, for obvious reasons, you guys know I'm a Steelers fan. Other than that game, is definitely the most interesting. It's the one I'm most excited for. It's between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Washington football team. So, football team is in the worst division in football, the NFC East. But, with Alex Smith as their starter, they're 5-1. They went 7-9 to end the season. That should tell you, when Alex Smith's in, he's really good, and he's the reason why they win. Now, we get to see him in playoffs for the first time in a few years. It's going to be interesting. And then, the Washington's defense is really good. They're top-tier defense, top-tier group of guys. They were a really good defensive line. Secondary is pretty good, too. And then you have Tampa Bay, who was, they won some games. They got blown out a couple times. It was interesting. They had a rough, middle of the season. And then at the end of the season, the teams they faced were not that great, but they just went on a tear. Tom Brady was lighting it up, and his stats got really padded from those last few games. Am I saying that he's not good? No, I'm not saying that. I think Tom Brady's still a good player. The thing is, though, is that I feel like people are distracted by the stats, and they're not realizing that the strength of the teams they played was not very good. And the thing about Washington is that they've had some really good, upset wins, over the Steelers. I believe they beat the Niners at one point as well. And the Niners weren't that great this year, but it's still, for, ahead of time going into that game, you'd probably think that San Francisco would win that. But Washington did, and it just shows you how much of a difference Alex Smith makes for that team as a whole, and especially the offense. They have the likely defensive rookie of the year in Chase Young, leading that defense. He just became a captain, and from what I know, he is a really good leader. He's in his rookie season. He's in the playoffs already, and then Alex Smith's, so many, 16 some odd years into his career, and he's finally back in the playoffs, this time with Washington. It's really interesting. This Washington team, I think, again, if Alex Smith had started the whole season, I think their record would be a lot different. I think they would just, regularly make playoffs and not just be forced in because they won the division, So this game is going to be really interesting. I don't know, because the last time, Tom Brady played a defense this good with Tampa was the Saints, I would say, and he was just atrocious in both games against the Saints. He threw a pick six in the first one. He might have thrown a pick six in the second one. I'm not entirely sure on that, but he played terribly. I believe they only scored 3 points in that second one. It was just terrible. The Saints blew them out. And I think at this point, Brady, he's declining. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I just think he's declining. As any 43-year-old would playing quarterback. You've been playing in this league for 20 years. Someone's got to give, and he's starting to decline a little bit. His reads are still good, but if he's playing with all these young guys, generating pressure and getting in his face all the time, I don't know how well he's gonna do. And I do think that Washington's going to pull off an upset here. A lot of people had the Buccaneers winning the Super Bowl because of all the free agent signing they did and, trading and all that. But I think that football team's going to pull off the upset here and move on to the divisional, which is kind of crazy. That's my bold take of the week, but that's just how I feel right now. All right, so the first game for Sunday is between the Ravens and the Titans. This one is very interesting because, most of you might know that they played each other last year in the playoffs, and the Titans beat the Ravens, the 14-2 Ravens that got the bye. It was a really crazy, upset win, but, when you think about it, the Titans were just there to win. They had they snuck into playoffs, with like a 9-7 record or something like that. And they were able to just go on a run. They beat the Patriots, they beat the Ravens, and they ended up losing to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. But the Titans, coming out of that, were looked at as a really good team, and they still did really well. I believe they won 11-5, which I feel like if you asked someone last year what you thought the Titans would be doing, like how good they would be doing next year, being this year, I don't think a lot of people would have thought they would have gotten 11 wins. They just didn't seem. It was before, Derrick Henry really broke out the past couple years, and it's a really, the impact he's made is crazy. He just managed to reach 2,000 rushing yards on the season after a 250 rushing yard performance. He was close to beating the single game record set by Adrian Peterson. It's pretty crazy. And then they had a game earlier in the year that went to overtime, and there was all this drama with it because the Titans players were like talking before the game on the Ravens logo, and then John Harbaugh started throwing a fit about it, which is sort of understandable, but at the same time he was kind of taking it too personally. They weren't pulling a juju and dancing on the logo, right? They were just kind of standing on there, and it just didn't. I feel like it didn't warrant all the drama. He was trying to get up in Vrabel's face about it, and then. The Titans beat him in overtime, and then John Harbaugh didn't shake his hand after the game, which I think is really disrespectful. You lost the game, just give the other team credit for beating you. It shouldn't be, sportsmanship shouldn't be questioned in a game like this, especially between two really good teams that game could have gone either way. But this particular game, the Titans have home field advantage because they won the AFC South. The Ravens are going in, Lamar Jackson he's 0-2 in the playoffs, and they just don't play well in the playoffs the past couple years. And, my prediction is that the Titans will win. I just think Derrick Henry is just unstoppable. He wants to go on another playoff run. And, the Titans advancing is really going to shake up the AFC playoff race. It's going to be, interesting to question who's going to beat them, at some point, if anyone. So, there's a lot of really good teams in the AFC. The AFC is going to be really hard to call. So you guys will have to see what my opinion is on those games later on. But for now, I do have the Titans winning this game. Alright, so this next game is between the Bears and the Saints. So this one is really interesting because the Bears barely snuck in. They even lost their Week 17 game. But because the Cardinals lost their game to the Rams, the Bears snuck into the playoffs. It's really, it's an interesting run for the Bears because they started 5-1, lost a bunch of games with Nick Foles, and then Trubisky comes in and just lights it up. It's weird because if he had been playing like this the whole season, like I said about the football team, they'd be, in a way different position than they would be, with the 7th seed. So, the Saints are a stacked team, and if reports are to be believed, Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara both are most likely going to be back for this game. And if they both are, then the Bears are screwed. Simply put, as much as I want to give the Bears credit, especially for sneaking in their final stretch of the season, they're not going to beat the Saints offense, with Drew Brees, Michael Thomas, and Alvin Kamara all back and healthy, which has got to be one of the first times all year that that's been the case. All of those guys have missed a few games, and I'm really confident in the Saints. They have a really stacked team. They have a top-tier defense, and their offense is so good when everyone's healthy. And Alvin Kamara is just such a crazy weapon, scoring 6 rushing touchdowns on Christmas Day. And the Bears' defense is really good. Roquan Smith had a breakout year. And by the way, I could make a whole video on snubs for All-Pros and, who shouldn't have made it and stuff. But Roquan Smith totally got snubbed for All-Pro. He should have made it. He had a really good season. I think Bobby Wagner's season was a little overrated. He's a really good player, but he didn't play as well as he has been. And Roquan Smith really deserved a selection, but it's neither here nor there. So like I said, the Bears, as bad as the Saints' playoff luck is, I don't think that that's going to catch up to them here. I think that the Bears are not going to win this. I think the Saints are going to go through them, especially if all those players are there. If one or both Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara are out, the Bears have more of a chance. But if they're both in there, then I don't think that they will. I think that the Saints are going to win. So I'm just going to stick with my pick of the Saints here. But if the Bears put up a fight, then good for them. We'll just have to see how this one turns out. But me personally, I'm taking the Saints. All right, and so the last game here is between the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So let me just crack my knuckles real quick and get right into this one. So, once again, you guys know I'm a Steelers fan. All right, so here's how I feel about this one. We had a rough patch, all right, but we came back from said rough patch. We were down 21-7 at the half against the Colts, and then we came back and won 28-24. It was a crazy comeback, and that single game restored all faith that I had lost in those 3 games that we lost, in the regular season. Then, the Browns, on the other hand, are playing really good football. It's their best season in a long, long time. And I would say arguably it's the best team they've had probably since their restart. They made playoffs once and had a winning record another time. This is probably the best team they've had since they came back to the league in '99. I have a lot of faith in the Browns, but Pittsburgh just has their number, and especially Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger's only lost twice to the Browns in his entire career. And he's tied with them once, and it's just. Listen, man, the Browns are giving themselves too much credit because when we played them in Pittsburgh, we beat them 38-7, and that kind of, put them in another gear. It made them, rethink their game plans and stuff, and they just played better after that game. But then they played our backups last week, right? And they won 24-22. And there were Browns players, dancing to the Corvette song in the locker room and everything. And it was just... It made me laugh because, they're like bragging and like trying to shove it in our face that they beat our backups by 2 points. They had all their starters, most of them at least. They had their receivers back from the COVID list. They had everyone playing. And they almost let Mason Rudolph run over them. Mason Rudolph played better than he did most of last year. But, you got to remember, I believe it might have been Duck Hodges, but I'm pretty sure Rudolph was starting when they beat the Browns one of the times last year. And it's just funny to me that they were bragging so much about that, and Browns fans are worse about it, and I'll give most of the Browns players credit. I didn't see most of them bragging about it, but the Browns fans are, they're bragging too much over beating us in the regular season. We rested our best players because we needed them for playoffs, and that's the other thing is that Roethlisberger, Pouncey, Hayward, and T.J. Watt are all rested. I just personally don't think the Browns stand much of a chance. And then on the other hand, the thing I forgot to mention was that they had a COVID outbreak. They have a couple guys. Their head coach, Kevin Stefanski's out. Ronnie Harrison, their starting safety's out. Joel Bitonio's out, I believe, and a couple other guys. They're out due to COVID. I just don't think the Browns have much of a chance to win this. If Pittsburgh cannot win this game, there's no excuses. And it's going to be really sad if that's how our season ends. However, I just don't think there's much of a chance of that happening because, the odds are a little stacked against the Browns, but I think even if they had everyone, I think we'd still beat them. So I'm taking the Steelers in this final game. And you can call it bias. I don't really care. I still think the Steelers are going to win. And so I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, and stay tuned for next week when we do the divisional round predictions. I'm really excited for this weekend's, set of games, and I hope you guys are too. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to leave a like, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.